And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game that was originally on Kickstarter and is now seeing its retail distribution. That game is Francis Drake, a game for 3 to 5 players from Eagle Games, and was one of the hit games of Essen this last year. And I can tell why. We'll go into that. But this is a game about building up resources in the pier or the dock of the area that you're starting in, and then taking those resources out to explore the world, conquer towns, conquer fortresses, and take over different types of galleons in order to get victory points through the accumulation of wealth and trade goods and all types of various things. Real quick, why don't we just take a look at the components, which are top-notch. We'll take a look at how the game plays, and then we'll come back here at the end and I'll sum it all up for you. Here you can see the majority of the components for Francis Drake. Now I've got several boards on top of each other right now just to kind of show you things. This right here is the supply board. It holds all of your supplies, your jewels, your gold, your silver, your actual supplies for sailing, trade goods, guns, crew, and several other components you'll use throughout the game for other trade goods, stuff you'll trade for, and tiles that you may need during the game. So these are all stored on this board. We're going to move this out of the way, but note that you have this nice board to hold everything. In addition to that nice resource board, we also have individual player boards. You can see one here for the green player. Each player will have 4 discs that they start the game with the number 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are their sailing discs that they'll be using to send out expeditions into the world, which you see behind me, or behind that there. You also have your galleon, which you will maybe upgrade to in order to fight other galleons. You have discs that you'll be using to place to take actions, these smaller discs here. And you have a cube that you will use to indicate how far you can sail when you do go to the sailing phase. In addition, this board will hold spots for your panache, your trade goods, your actual goods that you need to ship, your guns, your crew, and other various things you can get throughout the game. So, it holds everything for you, and then finally you have these awesome treasure chests that you will use to hide your gems, which you'll collect throughout the game and will be worth victory points at the end. You simply drop them in the slot, if it doesn't fall apart, and it will hide the gems for you. They're usually very sturdy, but holding it up is obviously not what it's meant to be used for. The rest of the board is divided into the harbor or the pier, which is up here, and the world in general down here, where you'll be traveling in order to take over towns and villages and castles, and you'll be fighting with galleons and getting trade goods. So the first portion of each round of the game is going to take place up here. You're going to prepare by taking actions or placing to take actions on this upper portion of the board, and then, which makes sense, you're going to move down in the second half of each turn in order to play out the actions you've taken and use the resources you've gotten from the pier out in the world to do various things. So we're going to cover each of those areas separately. Note that you will now see the pier, and then later we'll show you the rest of the world. Now we're looking at the world map portion, and you can see here that this is divided into 4 sections. There's a green section, a purple section, a yellow section, and a red section. And based on how many supplies you've collected, the barrel supplies, you're going to be able to travel a certain distance. If you only have 1 barrel, you're only going to be able to go to the first area. So let's say blue only has 1 barrel. If you have 2 barrels, you'd be able to go to the second and first sections. 3 will allow you to go to 3 of them, and 4 will allow you to go all the way to the red. Let's say green has 4. So blue can only take actions in this first area. Orange and green can take actions in 3, 2, and 1, and green can take actions in all 4 areas. After we've done this, and you'll note that I've got the gems placed out in their appropriate areas, the admiral and the governor will place out the ships and the troops appropriately. So these are little tokens that go out here. These galleons are pre-placed. You'll get to know what they are. So this one is a galleon with 1 gun. This one has 3 guns. This one here has 2 guns. And you get to know those values. But in addition, the admiral is going to place out additional gun tokens that will go face down. An additional 2 guns, 1 gun, or 0 guns. So maybe they just decide to place them out like this, just without too much thinking. But they may have strategy based on this. They want to make this one easier to fight. Maybe green is the admiral, and they want to make this one easier to fight because they're going to be fighting it. So, in addition, we have a 0, a 2, a 2, it should be 2 zeros, a 1, and a 2, that you're going to use for placing out for the troops. So the player that is the governor is going to place these out, and they're going to want to place them out in a way that makes it easier for them to fight or harder for other people to fight out on the board. So there are 4 of these spots, and they're going to place them out and be ready for that. Once that's all set up with our various trade goods and our gems and our modifiers for our galleons and forts are placed, we're going to go ahead and move into the sailing portion of the game, which is when we're going to place our discs. I showed you earlier, each player has 4 discs, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they could potentially have a ghost or the golden hind, the extra discs, the ghost just being a not action, a fake out, and the golden hind always going first. Let's just say green has the golden hind as well. So, you're going to be placing these discs out here in turn order. Green is first, orange is second, and blue is third. That's what we established at the end of our port phase, or the dock phase. So, when that's done, you're going to place these discs in turn order. So green will place a disc first. They may place any of their discs, 1, 2, 3, or 4, and they can place them at any of the spaces on the board because they can travel all the way to 4. So, they could place on a trade place, and they place on here, hoping that they'll be able to trade one of their purple trade goods in for a coffee, a tobacco, or an indigo, which will give them points based on sets at the end of the game. For a full set, you get 26 points, so it's quite a few points. And they would place a disc out here. Maybe they place their 2. They're not worried about going first. They're just kind of placing a disc, hoping that maybe they can go second. 2 meaning that it would be their second action to take out on the board. Then orange would take an action, and maybe they're really excited. They really want to attack this fort out here. And they want to get the gold. So they're going to place their 1 disc out on this area right here, face down always. Then blue would place their disc, and maybe they place their 3 disc. Now blue can only place in this area over here, so maybe they're looking to attack this fortress right here. And you're going to continue doing this with all of your discs, placing them out there. So real quick, I'll just place the discs and we'll show how they would resolve. So now that everyone's placed their ships, we're going to reveal them all, and everybody will have their numbers out here. The highest or the lowest number always going at the top of the list, unless there's a tie. So we'll see here that blue is only placed in area number 1 because that's the only area they can place in. Whereas orange is placed in a couple of different areas, actually just 2 and 3, and we have green having placed all the way up to 4 because they have the most supplies. So we'll see here that we've got these all flipped over. In addition, we're going to flip over the modifiers for the fortresses, being the troops, and the modifiers for the galleons, being additional guns. And these are going to come out to modify the strength of these different areas and make it either harder or not any harder for the people that are already there to fight. So, we've got those flipped over. And that's going to modify the strengths of these. Now that we've got all this done, we're going to go ahead and we're going to see if anybody has the golden hind ship. And we know that green does. So that is always going to go first. Green gets to take that action. And they are currently in a town. Towns, when you fight them, will give you victory points and potentially gems. And in addition to that, they're going to require troops or your crew in order to fight them. So this one and all towns have a base of 1 crew, and it's never anything more than that. So you would have to return a crew to the supply that you gathered from the pier phase, which we'll show you later. Return it to the supply, and you will get the victory points printed here. Green would get 2. In addition, the first player to complete each of these is going to get the gem that is there. So green would get this gold, and they'd put it in their treasure chest to hide it for later, and that's worth victory points at the end, 4 victory points for gold. They would also take their disc back, and we would continue on. But they're going to mark right now that they completed or fought against and successfully completed a town, and that's important for victory points at the end of the round. Then we'd move on to the number 1 discs. Again, starting with green because green's the first player. So green right here beats out orange even though orange placed first. And they're now fighting a fortress. Fortresses require crew and guns. And in this case, it's going to be 2 plus 1 crew and 2 guns. Meaning that they need to return 3 gray cubes and 2 black cubes to the supply from their own area. So they're going to return this stuff to the supply, and essentially they're going to beat this area. When they do so, they're going to get 4 victory points and the gem again. So now they've collected 2 gold. They're going to take their disc back, and they're going to move down on the fortress area over here to show that they've now attacked both a town and a fortress. Then we would move on to orange, who is at the same spot, and they, unfortunately, are second. They have to return the same resources, and instead of getting the victory points and the gem, they're simply going to get the victory points. Tough break for them. At any point after completing an action, a player may decide to forego the rest of their actions and return to the port. When they do so, they're going to be choosing their position in turn order, and they could simply move their ship back to the port, and they would get victory points for returning earlier, 2 if they return first, or 1 if they return second, without taking all 4 of their actions. Just know that that's an option if the remaining actions on the board are no longer any good for you. Blue would finish their first action, and they would trade in 1 of their purple cubes for any one of those 3 trade resources on the board. So they have a choice of coffee, tobacco, or indigo. And maybe they decide to take the indigo because they need it for their sets out here, and sets of goods at the end of the game are worth a lot of points. Once we've completed everybody's first action, we're going to move on to their second action, starting with green, who has number 2. So green's number 2 is here, and they would trade in a purple cube for 1 of these trade resources. Then we'd move on to orange, and orange is over here at the town that green already took over. They have to turn in 1 gray cube. Maybe they don't have it, so they forgo this action, and they don't get their 2 victory points. But if they did, they would turn in their thing, get 2 victory points, and move down right here. They also completed the fortress earlier, so they're down on the towns and the fortresses. The second for the blue has decided to pick up another one of their goods, so they pick up the sugar, and then we move on to the threes. So you'll see that these keep going. Now, the only thing I need to show you is a galleon. So we're at green's galleon. Green has to have a galleon, the improved ship, to do this, and they're going to need one gun in order to beat this galleon. They have a gun, so they turn it in. They have to flip this tile over, which should have been flipped over earlier, but it has no additional guns, so they're okay. They only need one gun to beat this. They return their gun, and they get their 4 victory points, as well as this jewel, which is worth 5 at the end of the game, and we'll move down here on this track. They have fought a town, a fort, and a galleon, which is worth 10 points at the end of the round. And for each of those that you complete, you'll get more points. So if you only do 1, you get 1. If you do 2, you get 4, and if you do 3, you get all 10. So, of course, we would complete everybody else's action with orange 3 and then the blue 3, and maybe these get pulled off of the board. And then the green 4, and this gets pulled off of the board, and orange, and so forth and so on. Maybe this last gem is removed. At the end of the round, as I said, you're going to score these points based on what people conquered. So we'll assume that blue probably conquered one of these, and orange is going to stay exactly as they are, because blue focused on trade goods. So the players would get their appropriate points. In addition, whoever are the admiral and whoever's the governor are going to get points for remaining gold. So these are still out here on the board. Points would be awarded to those players for protecting that or for not having that taken. The same goes for the silver for the governor. So those are going to be out there. If they're remaining, the players will get points, and you'll move on. These will all get restored. Everyone will get their pieces back from the board, so these will all be removed. And we'll head on into another round, with the turn order being established by the role the players passed in at the end of the round. So if each player took all of their actions, it'll be the same order as before, whereas if somebody passed earlier, someone may be in the new first player position. At that point, you're going to go ahead and you're going to move back up to the top of the pier, which you'll see in a moment, just kind of to establish how it works. But note that the tiles that are there will shuffle from round to round and be in a different order in order to give you some variation in the way that the pier works throughout the game. So here you can see the pier portion of the board. We've got our players set up first, second, and third. In this place, orange, since they're last, will get a bonus of a gun, because at the beginning of the game, being last is not great. They get this gun, which they'll need for fighting later. Now, this is set up like a road. It starts here with the crew, and it goes all the way around and winds up back here at the outbound harbor where the players will be leaving to sail the world. So on this road, you're going to be placing your little discs in order to take actions, and the actions are many and varied. And you can place as far up on this road as you want. So they could skip crew, shipyard, guns, and go straight to supplies if they wanted to get the best supply action. And doing so would give them some of their supplies. However, now that they've done this, they can never go back to these previous actions. So if you want to skip ahead and get a great action by placing one of your discs up here, that's all fine and well, but note that you have essentially passed on all of the previous actions. Sometimes you may want to be slow and steady, and other times you may want to skip ahead to get something that you need for your trip. So, if I skip this far ahead, I would no longer have access to any of these or supplies ever again. But each other player could still place behind me and take their sweet time getting the actions they want, although they may not get the better versions of the actions. So that's how that's going to work. Green could place here, and orange could place here, and blue could place all the way up here if they wanted to, and then green would have to place forward of their own, so maybe they go there. And you get the idea. You're going to place and advance along the road as you go. Now, each of these actions is going to give you either resources or a benefit of some type. You can see here that crew is going to give you crew, and the first person there will get 2, while everyone else will get 1. And crew are in the form of these gray cubes that you'll need in order to attack various places, basically later in the sailing portion of the game. The shipyard will give you a gun and your galleon if you place there, and your galleon is needed for fighting other galleons out in the world, as well as guns are needed for that as well. Guns will give you guns, while supplies will give you these barrels that I showed you. The more supplies you have, the further you can sail. The queen is going to give you a gun and a trade good, which is a purple cube that you can trade for resources from the natives, which will give you points at the end of the game, and it's also going to give you your galleon so you can fight other galleons. The tavern here is going to let you roll this die, and based on what you roll, will either give you crew, or it will give you a ghost ship, which is essentially a fake-out placement that you can use during the sailing phase. The admiral is going to let you place all of the galleons that will go out on the board for the opposing galleons, and only the admiral will know which galleons are where, making it easier for them to fight. In addition, they're going to get victory points for each gold that's unclaimed on the board later in the game. Trade goods is going to give you a trade good, pretty straightforward, whereas the governor is going to let you place all of the troops that go out on the board, so only he will know where the troops are. He also gets points for each silver left over, and will get to swap places with one of the other players in turn order when it comes to that point later. We have another crew, and then we have one kind of interesting space, which is Francis Drake. This is the only space where you're allowed to place 2 discs on, and you must place 2 discs there in sequential turns. When you do so, you'll get a bunch of guns and crew in order for doing that. The panache is going to let you fight later without guns, only in fort areas, so you'll kind of sneak around the back. You'll still need your crew, but you won't need your guns. Guns again, we have the informer. The informer is going to let you look at some of the discs in a placement later and swap discs if you want, or sometimes move one of your own discs away. In addition, he gets a trade good. Supplies again, and then we have the golden hind or hind. And that is a ship that is going to let you place out on the board and always goes first. So whoever gets this will always have the first choice in action in the sailing phase. Finally, we have the investor and the dockside. The investor is going to be a place where you have to place at least once per game. You must do that, and you must lose 4 victory points, but you get either 2 guns and a crew or 2 crew and a gun, or you can choose to take your galleon for that turn. So that's one thing you have to do in the game, and if you don't, you can't win. So you have to do it. And then finally, you have a choice of 1 resource at the end, and then you may pass, and whoever passes will be first in turn order if they pass first. Maybe then orange passes second, and blue passes third. And this will be the order 1, 2, 3 for later in the game. And that is how you play the game of Francis Drake. I know that the order is a little bit weird. I kind of put the world map out before I put out the pier, but I think in order to understand how you manage to use the resources from the pier out here, you need to understand how the resources work out in the world. So I think that's the appropriate order for this, but if you want to watch it in different segments, try and see how it works for yourself, I understand. Anyhow, you're going to play 3 rounds like this, first doing the pier, then doing the world out here and establishing the ability to take over towns, fortresses, and galleons in order to get victory points, and whoever has the most points through collecting gems, through attacking those towns and fortresses, through accomplishing various different goals throughout the game, is going to be the winner of Francis Drake. There you have it. That is Francis Drake, a 3 to 5 player game from Eagle Games. And the game takes probably an hour and a half to 2 hours. And I don't have enough time to say all of the great things that I feel about this game. The game is extremely thematic for a Euro game. I mean, Euros are not really known for their theme, but this one plays out very well. You know, you spend your first half of each round of the 3 years of the game preparing to go out to sail the world, collecting goods, collecting crew, collecting guns, you know, getting trade goods, negotiating, if you're one of those people, where all of the different types of strengths are going to be out on the board. And then after that, you set up, you've got all your stuff, and you take it out and you sail the world in order to, you know, trade and conquer places. You've got to get prepared, and then you take that preparation and you enact it out onto the board. And whoever best strategizes where to go first and what to accomplish is going to, you know, get the best benefits. So it plays out really well in that. It flows very well, and everything setup-wise, from the setup to the gameplay, melds together into a thematic Euro experience. On top of that, the components are excellent. The game, you know, is made with awesome little barrels, and the setup and the actual storage for the game is wonderful. Production quality is top-notch, so I have no complaints about anything really in the game. Overall, I'd say that Francis Drake is a strong contender for Game of the Year in my opinion. Kudos to Eagle Griffin for making it another great project. Hopefully that now that you've seen how the game plays, you can decide whether it's one for you, but I think that if you're a medium to heavyweight Euro player, Francis Drake is one that you're probably really going to enjoy.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.